So a couple things for people that want something other than politics or different innovative ways of funding government programs is I'm into games. I'm into game theory. And that my idea of dealing with Congress uses game theory. If you're familiar with martial arts, it's jujitsu. Mm-hmm. The idea is that you're facing an opponent with a huge amount of energy and force coming at you. And instead of you trying to fight that force, you let that force go with you, and you use that force to overcome the problem. So it's called jujitsu, and I think most people probably know what that's all about. But that's the idea of the countermeasures for Congress is the incentive to have a budget surplus and split it. The idea of the double the salary of that is to try to use the energy that they have to want to financially be successful in Washington, D.C. And who can blame them, It's like, my God, their salary is $175,000 a year, and they're in a very expensive metro area, and they got a home there and a home here. Why wouldn't you be tempted to take some of the offers that come your way? Of course, it's understandable. So I want to take away that incentive to, just selfishly help that lobbyist or whatever, but to help the whole country. So use the financial desire to improve yourself. Yeah, let the legislator improve themselves, but at the point of improving the country even more so. So just letting them split 1/10,000th of the budget surplus, that's a drop in the bucket. Let them. It's like a bonus. And they have to earn it each year. So that's one thing. But the other things I'm interested in game theory is a game that I invented with my renter that lived with me for a couple of years. He was into crypto. We did Reno Rummikub. And Rummikub, you can look it up on Wikipedia, the rules. The article gives you a link to the official rules. And the variations are very different. Now, Rummikub is a fun game because you're doing lateral and linear thinking. So you're trying to empty the chips on your board either in a linear sequence, 1, 2, 3, 4, or all of the same numbers, and you can rearrange things. Everything on the board has to be a grouping of 3 or more. So you can't have any single grouping of 2 or 1. It has to be 3 or more. So you can rearrange it. So like you can start out early in the game, you got a bunch of 1, 2, 3, 3, 4, 5, and then later on when you got more and more pieces dropped, it ends up being all of the same number. Like bunches of 1s and bunches of 2s. It seems to shift that way. So in Reno Rummikub, the game moves faster because you start out with 14 chips or 14 cards, not 18. You start out with 18. The official is 14. The other thing is the sequence 1, 2, 3, 4 can be 2, 4, 6, 8. It can be where the gap between 2 chips or 2 cards is the same gap. So as long as the gap is constant for one grouping, that's fine. So you can have 1, 3, 5, or you can have 1, 4, 7. You can have a gap of 3, a gap of 4, and so on. So it makes you think a lot harder with your chips in that. Can I do something? So you have to think a lot harder. And so at the start of the game, if you got young little kids in it, or people that hate math, you say, are we going to go with sequences with a constant gap, or is the gap going to always be 1? So you make that rule at the beginning. So if I have little kids in there, or people that hate math, we go with the simple one. But the other one is, if it's the same number, we don't care about the color. So it doesn't have to be 4 distinct colors or 3 distinct colors, just the same number. So you can have 8 of the same number. Official Rummikub, you could never have more than 4 because there's only 4 colors. Or if you're using cards, 4 suites. But, and then the only other difference in Reno, and this is what's really interesting, is in the rearrangement. And there's a lot more opportunity to rearrange since you can use different gap sequences, and you can have more than of the same number. is if you start rearranging and you can't remember where you started and you got some stragglers and there's just no way you can make a perfect grouping of everything, you have to pick up the stragglers and do a penalty draw. That rule is not in the official one. There is no penalty for unable to rearrange. The last thing that's interesting is it's so strange, but it makes the game a lot more fun. 95% of the time, when one person goes out, if you continue the round around the table, everybody else can go out. So it's kind of fun at that point to see if everybody could go out in the same round. And if a person asks for help, obviously a person went out first, won the game. But the other people, if they're unable to go out the same round, they can ask the people around them, can you help me go out? And so, and it's really weird. Why is it that you do 20 games and 19 of the games, everybody can go out? And that makes it fun because everybody feels like they also won or they tied. And so there isn't that loser disappointment, Plus you don't have to keep score and add up numbers and all that stuff. So if you're doing multiple rounds of the game, it's like, you don't have to worry about that. I use a canvas sack and we just take the chips and do there. We don't have to worry about points or anything like that. So the game goes faster. You don't have to worry about counting points and all that stuff. So it's a great game. The rules are there. The other thing that's interesting is 3-player chess. And the original article on the political race being like 3-player chess, that has 298,000 viewers. Right now I'm trying to get to 300,000, so if I can get 2,000 viewers, that'll be just fantastic. I'm gonna have a little, hallelujah point when I get to 300,000. But the rules for 3-player chess are in there. If you read the comments at the end of it, there's different links to Amazon sets of that. The great thing about 3-player chess is, again, the most powerful person typically loses because the two weaker people, if they're smart, and in this election the problem is we're not seeing that smartness yet, but the two will do a temporary alliance. I'll leave you alone if we make this move against the big guy. Now those alliances can shift from move to move to move, but the idea is if Trump debates Kennedy, that's like an alliance, because Kennedy's already wants to debate Trump. So that's kind of the alliance. That's all that Trump and the Kennedys have to do is agree to debate. That's it. Make it a very fantastic, widespread watch debate. You get Tucker Carlson and Megyn Kelly as a moderator. Wow, it would be the debate of our lifetime. But the other thing neat about 3-player chess is you don't win until you've done 2 checkmates. The first checkmate puts that party on a pause basis. That person can't move again until they can get out of checkmate. So the other player can come to the rescue of the first person checkmated. And so in normal 2-player chess, the minute a checkmate happens, the game's over with. But that's not the case in 3-player chess. So that's kind of fun, the fact that you have to do 2 checkmates to win. And also, the first person who checkmates gets the players, the pieces of that checkmated person who's in pause. So your army doubles on that. So that's the idea, is that when the first checkmate happens, we've done the debate. It's kind of like a first player with it. Initially, yes, Bobby will get most of the players of the Democrats. That's where the Democrats disappear off history, is because you basically have taken all their players. Yeah. And it's just like the game.
So did you develop this from your knowledge of chess? Like, you think you would have never came up with this political strategy if you never played a game of chess
That's
in your life?
true.
Yeah.
So like here I have a book called The Encyclopedia of Chess Variants. Mm-hmm. And I have this page talking about 3-player Chinese chess. I was married to a Chinese woman for 34 years. And I fell in love with Chinese chess. It's 90% the same as Western chess. They have the king, and they have the bishop, and the knight, and the rook, and pawns. But it's different enough instead of having a pawn in every column, they have every other column has a pawn, and they have 2 extra power pieces called cannons, which they move like a rook, but they capture by jumping. It's like a catapult. They throw it's like an old catapult. They throw it, they can attack anything on the other side of whatever they jump. They can jump their same side or the enemy side, but whatever they land on, they capture. So the game moves faster. It's a very interesting game, and I fell in love with Chinese chess and Korean chess. And I was the first English language web page back in the 90s that gave the rules of Korean chess, which uses the same pieces and names as Chinese chess, but the movement rules are different. Korean chess is even wilder than Chinese chess. And you can get the games on your phone, play it, and everything. But I explained the 3-player rules in that one article. So if you just read the article, not for politics, but just for the game, you'll enjoy the article just for that reason alone. There's another game I really like. I talk about it, but it's a little bit hard to draw. If anybody's good at illustration and drawing, they could help me do it. We call it Kentucky Chinese Checkers.
Kentucky Chinese checkers.
Yeah.
Wow.
And if you've ever seen Chinese checkers, the game is like a little kid's game. You can only jump over one ball at a time, you know. But in Chinese checkers, my ex-wife taught me the Chinese rules. You just have to be symmetrical in your jump. If there's 2 empty spaces before the piece you jump, and there's 3 empty spaces behind it, you can jump to that 3rd empty space. Because when you look behind you, there's 2 empty spaces before the piece you jumped over, and there's 2 empty spaces coming. So you can jump from the one corner all the way to the other corner in one move. Because if there was, 4 or 5 empty spaces on both sides. So you just have to have this symmetry. Same number of empty spaces before and after. So that means that during a move, you may go all the way into a side territory and then jump back out. So you can just jump all over the place in the Chinese rules of Chinese checkers. And most Americans don't know about the Chinese rules of Chinese checkers. But the game becomes an adult game at that point. I've played with people with PhDs in mathematics, and they were amazed at the geometrical complexity that can happen in Chinese checkers. But the Kentucky Chinese checkers is even wilder. And it's one of my wife's grandsons, him and I came up with the idea, is that in the Chinese checkers, typically the lines go that way, but you can see a straight line of what do you call them, craters.
Yeah.
You can see a straight line of craters. So you can go down that diagonal interval that you can see it, but it's not the normal linear that way or linear that way. So you can jump down those diagonals, but it has to be a perfect diagonal where it doesn't kind of curve off. It's just straight across the board. So you have more ways of moving. And again, it causes the mind to think a lot more complex. It's more of an adult thing. But it's hard to kind of draw or explain that. I mean, if someone's good at that, I would love to be able to write up a paper on Kentucky Chinese checkers.
That's the first I've ever heard of that. I mean, how many people know about this game? Is this like a very known, like in Kentucky? Is this like, who mainly plays this?
Me and my friends and relatives, that's it. I'll be glad to play the game with you.
Yeah, I'm all for it. I like chess.
It's fantastic.
Yeah.
And again, it turns these little kiddie games into really fun adult level games, because you have to think not only linearly but laterally. You have to think outside the box. It's just really, it's kind of a form of meditation.
Yeah.
Where you leave everyday life and you're so involved in the game. It is a blast, and I think it's good to be able to constantly have the ability to leave everyday logic and leave and just kind of relax the brain and open it and then all of a sudden you can start seeing things, ordinary problems.
Yeah, I was going to say it has to be really, really transparent to solving real life problems with this way of thinking.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I consider myself on the conservative libertarian side one of the best outliers who write.
I call that a conservatarian. That's a
Conservatarian. I love that
yeah,
name.
yeah. I was like, I've never heard of it, but it's got to make sense though. I mean, you're not willing to say you're a libertarian, but you fall in line with conservative values. That's where I pretty much see myself as.
The other thing, we had a temporary power outage, and we resumed now. During the outage, we talked about something. The legislative secret voting. One of the other advantages of it is that since the party leaders won't know how the legislator is voting or who is voting, so I would expect that the average legislator is no longer going to put up with the BS that they have to vote on a bill that's only been printed for 5 minutes. So if I was a legislator, I would vote no on everything. I'd become like Ron Paul was famous for being called Dr. No because he voted no 98% of the time. I would hope that 90% of the legislators would vote no on every bill being tried to be forced down their throat. That they would just say no, 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 no. And not until the bill has been printed and if there's any complex wording in it, explained, everything. So that there's a full understanding of the bill before votes happen. So the party leaders, they can put the bill up for voting, but it's going to be like 98% no until the bill is presentable. I think that alone would be a key advantage to legislative secret voting, because with the transparent voting, those people who refuse to work the bill until it's readable, they get punished right now. They get punished by their own party, And so that freedom to be an individual, stubborn, intellectual human, I think is what we need in legislators. And I love Representative Thomas Massey for showing that independence. But it would allow every legislator, no matter what secrets are in his closet, to be equally stubborn. Because when they get behind that secret vote, nobody knows how they voted. I'm just so sold on it. So.
I mean, that's one of the most compelling points I've heard so far. Why would you want a Congress that's knowingly coerced, knowingly not willing to put the truth first because they're threatened? They literally can't. They're held on a leash. So, I mean, yeah, that's one of the most compelling points I think we have. I mean, I think you put that in front of any real congressman, they're going to take a look at that twice. I mean, trust me, that is a very compelling way to put things.
Yeah, and who wouldn't want to? I mean, we're spending $1 trillion additional debt every 100 days. Some of us have kids and grandkids, or want to have kids and grandkids.
Mm-hmm.
So why do you want to have it where it's like Robert Kennedy makes this point all the time? Is the idea is, why do you want your children to be taxed only for that tax to pay interest on the debt? And we're headed to that point. And if you can't do more than just pay interest on the debt, the government is going to 100% collapse.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we're on a trajectory for total collapse of government.
But they're going to make sure that the people suffer first. We're going to go to the absolute extreme of the complete divide, people living on the streets, homelessness like never seen before. So, I mean, I really think that this could go really, really bad if it stays on this trajectory.
Yeah, and there's some good science fiction novels all about how scary things can get. So it is totally imperative that the Democrat Party gets erased from history.
Mm-hmm.
So what can you do as an individual? Like in states where Kennedy's name is not on the ballot as president, like Kentucky, we need to get 5,000 signatures for RFK to be on the ballot. And we're not asking you to vote for RFK in Kentucky. We're just asking you to put your name so that his name is on the ballot. We want a 3-way choice in all 50 states. And again, the minute we get to that point, if Kennedy right now and some of the, like in Utah right now today, he's getting 14% of the vote. Once he gets more and more closer to being approved in all the 50 states, that's going to go up. especially since the Democrats have nothing except the crazy Plan C.
Yeah.
You know, and I don't know how many people want to see President Obama back in office.
Not many.
You know, so I've given you a lot of material to read. If you're going to make comments, make them underneath the article. Because the problem with X articles is that you'll do a little pitch post to get people to read the article, and then people, instead of making the comment beneath the article, they make it beneath the pitch post. But the pitch post is hidden, but the article is centralized under the menu page. So when you do a comment or a reply, do it underneath the article. Because what I have to do right now is I have to do a screenshot and do a paste over there. And
yeah, it's a lot of work.
It's a lot of work, you know.
Yeah, so go follow Raleigh's X page. It should be at X. It should be at Roleigh Martin.
It's @ Roleigh Martin with no space. It's
okay.
Roleigh with O, ROLEIGH.
Yeah, we'll put that up there. Yeah.
So I've enjoyed this conversation.
Absolutely. I mean, this is crucial times right now. I'm glad that you could join me here. We're trying to get as many interviews before the election, and I'd love to have you on afterward to see how what we're talking about now, what that transcends into the future of America. So again, I'm glad to have you on here. This has been very insightful. My viewers are going to learn a lot from this. I mean, these are things that really no one is talking about. I mean,
yeah, and I started talking about it, but we got that power outage. I have another article about the history of education in America, and it's really interesting. Before we had the American Revolution, we had a British colonial army. So people who were 18 that went in the military before the American Revolution went into the British colonial military. And all these entering privates took a reading, writing, and arithmetic test, a literacy exam. So back in the 1980s, I got the master's degree in sociology. I was a member of the American Sociology Association. And we'd get a magazine every month that had all these abstracts of scientific studies done in the intervening month. And none of these things got saved on the computer. I can't find it. But there was one military historian that realized that the literacy rate of buck privates going back hundreds of years during the British military colonial history and then the American history, prior to the first public schools in the early 1800s, about 1815 or something like that in Connecticut. And the public schools came out as an anti-Catholic, anti-religion, kind of a prejudice wave against all the new Irish immigrants coming over. So at that time, 40% of the students in Massachusetts were Catholics, and they had great Catholic schools. And the Protestants were jealous because there wasn't a single Protestant sect. There was like 20, 30 Protestant sects. Now there's probably 100. And so they had tiny schools, and their schools couldn't compete with the Catholic schools. So what the Protestants did is they settled on a Protestant neutral denominational textbook, kind of like a Protestant Bible. And they made the public schools, really it was a Protestant church school, but they called it a public school. So they would take the tax money of everybody, including Catholics, to fund it. So the origination of public schools came out of this Catholic hatred movement. But they discovered that it's like Milton Friedman said, a new broom sweeps clean, but after the broom gets old, it doesn't anymore. That's what's happened with public schools. As we've gone through, and there was another study I read then, they did a content analysis of all of the K-12 textbooks through the 20th century. And every 20 years, the textbooks got dumbed down a grade. So what started out as a 4th grade book, 80 years later became an 8th grade book. So the reading level and the literacy level is just horrendous now of what we're getting out of graduating students. And the literacy scores of people going in the military is worse. And if you go to Washington, D.C., there's a museum of journalism. And you can see the history of newspapers and what everyday editorials look like. And typically, editorials are written at like a 6th grade reading level. The reading level back in American Revolution times is just totally amazing. I would think most college graduates would have trouble reading everyday newspapers back in the 1790s, 1780s. But, and what my paper talks about is the more heterogeneous a society is, and we become increasingly heterogeneous. Most of these immigrants coming in are non-European. The worse public schools are. Public schools work best when the society is homogeneous. So like in Japan. But the interesting thing about Japan, the article talks about it, even in Japan, half of the high schools are private.
I didn't know that.
And the private schools, the public schools ended up in many cases being better than the private schools in Japan. Because the private schools had high standards. I mean, the public schools had high standards and all that. So it's really interesting. But definitely tax-funded schools work best in a homogeneous society, kind of a monocultural. For a heterogeneous society, the best thing is to get away from tax-funded education. There's a couple alternatives to using taxes. You can use the double value or triple value tax deduction charities that can help out schools. The other thing is, and this was proposed by a very conservative Democrat who ran for governor in, I think in 1988 or something like that. He was a very conservative, John Silver was his name. He wrote a book called Straight Shooting, fantastic book. And when he ran for governor of Massachusetts, a lot of the more radical left Democrats voted for the Republican because he was farther to the left than the Democrat at that point. John Silver he wanted to take away tax funding of colleges completely and allow students to take out like a 30-year mortgage. And they would pay a different interest rate based upon how good a job they got. So they would be private education mortgages. I took that idea and I got permission from him to reprint his chapter in my magazine, Share Debate International. But the idea of a private education mortgage from kindergarten on. Why do we have to use tax-funded money for K-12, K-8? Do you realize how much less money you would pay in property tax if you didn't have to worry about schools? And right now, you're paying half your property taxes going for basically K-12 education. And it's from the day you first get a job to the day you die. You're paying that property tax, or you're paying a higher rent to pay that property tax. But if you're paying just for your own family, it's only when the kids are young. And if they have take out a 30-year mortgage, you help them, okay, for another 30 years beyond that. But people who think that public schools are free and all that, no, they're extremely expensive. And that's one thing the government hides from you, is how expensive public schools are, because they don't show you what is the average amount a taxpayer is going to pay throughout their life for a public school. They use all these formulas that hide the cost. Finding out the true cost of education is the hardest subject to research in government funding. And so if we went to the private education mortgages, we would have schools that focus on the needs of the student. Right now, the whole idea of we got to have so many A's, B's, C's, D's, and E's and F's. Who in the private sector is going to pay to get an F? Who's going to pay to get a D? Obviously, you're studying the wrong thing if you're going to get a D. You know, aren't you better going to a school where, you know, you have an interest in it and you can get, you know, B's or C pluses or A's? You're going to achieve something with your life. So this whole idea that the grade system is what we need for kids, what we do right now is we dumb down the thing so everybody gets a passing grade, but they don't really learn something that can do something with their life. So I've always said the root cause of all problems in our society, the root cause is the way we educate the kids.
Yeah, and I can speak from experience. Only graduating 5 years ago from high school, I went through everything you just said, and it's only gotten worse each year. The garbage they're teaching in our public schools, I mean, you can't even think of it. We're going off of biology, we're going off of basic things that we've taught our kids, and it's not America.
Yeah. So that's definitely an article that, and is, again, if we got Thomas Massey in here, I don't see why we can't cut 60, 70% of the budget.
But yeah, that about covers everything. Raleigh, thanks for coming on. Like I said, go to X or Twitter, we call it, whichever one you're familiar with. You'll find his X page. You'll find all the articles. It's at Roleigh Martin. It's Roleigh Martin. And yeah, thanks for coming on. Hell of a conversation, and look to have you on in the future.
Yeah, I'll be glad to come back. And on Rumble, are they able to comment on a Rumble station?
Yes, they are actually. Yeah, the beautiful thing about Rumble is you can comment, you can donate, there's a lot more things you can do for creators. I mean, obviously the free speech thing is the most important thing, no censorship. But yeah, Rumble it's not where X and YouTube is right now. I think it's 20 times less, but it's got a lot of potential. I think Rumble,
will this interview be on any other platforms?
Be on Rumble, Spotify, YouTube, X, and then Telegram in the future. We have a Telegram channel.
Oh, you'll be on X as well.
Oh yeah,
yes. And YouTube.
Everything, yep.
Oh, wow.
The only issue with X though, there's a 4-hour limitation. So we're not at 4 hours yet, but we're like 3 hours-ish. Yeah, anything over 4 hours, you have to divide into like 2 parts. So
yeah,
we'll be good. We'll be on the X platform where we'll probably get the most views, honestly, and that's where everybody's at. So, but yeah, no, this is a historical interview. I mean, tons of clips are going to be used from this from other creators as well. So, but yeah, glad to have you on. This is extremely insightful.